Let's have a look at the front pages. The Guardian says desperate last-minute efforts have been launched to avoid a Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the French President Emmanuel Macron saying he has persuaded Vladimir Putin to endorse urgent talks aimed at securing a ceasefire.
Meanwhile, The Times says that the Prime Minister will hail a moment of pride for the nation as he prepares to announce all COVID restrictions are lifted.
And the Daily Mail's headline hails the Queen as an example to us all as she plans to fulfil a number of online audiences and telephone meetings this week after testing positive for COVID.
OK, we're joined now in the studio by the Mirror's Kevin Maguire and our health editor, Dr Hilary. The Mail's Andrew Pearce is actually not with us for once. He's at his home in North London. This is because of COVID, is it, Andrew?
It's because I've been exposed to somebody who had COVID, and you've got to have so many. The rules are so complicated. I haven't got COVID, but I have to isolate for a day or two and have a test every day.
Hang on, Andrew. This is interesting, isn't it? Because, as you say, we're now in that blurred stage of: are you supposed to isolate and stop if you are in contact with someone in COVID?
Yeah.
Well, this week, you're not even supposed to do that if you've got COVID. But so it sounds like you're doing that out of an abundance of caution, are you?
Following the letter of the law.
Well, but just because I think that's the rules at the moment. So the rules are the rules. So being a good lad, I'm obeying the rules. And when the rules change at the end of the week, I would follow the fact you don't have to do anything at all.
I agree with you though about the vagueness. You see, I'm not sure you're right. I mean, perhaps we can just check this. I think you could be.
We have a doctor. We have a doctor in the studio.
Well, hang on. I thought that if you were in contact with somebody who'd had it, provided you did a lateral flow test and it came up negative, you were back in the world.
Yeah.
What's the situation?
I'm with you on that, Richard. Yeah,
so he could be here then.
Yes, he could.
You just wanted more time in bed, didn't you? You lazy.
I didn't get any more time in bed, let me tell you.
I
didn't get any more time in bed.
No.
I still got up. I was reading the papers online just at the normal time.
Look, you're wrong again. Like you're wrong every time. You're even wrong now about what you have to do. I mean, you go on about getting rid of the rules. You're following rules that aren't even in place.
That's exactly why we should get rid of the rules.
If you're in close contact, look and learn. If you're in close contact with somebody who has COVID, you don't have to isolate yourself. You'll go on about bureaucracy and how Johnson should get away with all this. You're just confused. Did Maitland not turn up to get you out of bed?
Well,
is that what happened?
I expect, Dr Hilary, you would praise Andrew's caution.
He's taking personal responsibility, isn't he?
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, we're about to hear that even if you have COVID, you won't need to isolate anymore. If you just treat it like a common cold, effectively. At some point, we won't even be testing for it because we won't be getting our hands on.
Yes, so those who are infected and infectious can wander about anywhere they want to, spreading Omicron variant around the country, including within hospitals. 1 in 20 people.
Do I get disapproval seeping from every pore here?
Look, 1 in 20 people currently are infected with COVID-19. If they're going to visit their relatives in hospital, in those hospitals that allow visitors, the potential for making people worse, not better in hospitals, is going to be there. So I think abandoning all restrictions all at once, especially the self-isolation for people who know they're infected, I think is a mistake. I think it's too much too soon.
If you had flu, you wouldn't go and see somebody in hospital. You would apply that sensible rule.
Exactly right.
So in a sense, aren't we just kind of getting back into the mainstream of normal behaviour?
Well, remember that a third of people with COVID don't have symptoms, but they're infectious. So there's that risk as well. No, it's not flu. I mean, people said from the beginning, it's just like flu, isn't it? But you ask 11,500 people...
No, I wasn't comparing it to flu in terms of its effect. All I'm saying is that we do kind of self-isolate when we've got flu. We wouldn't go and see an elderly relative when we had flu, or even if we had a cold, we wouldn't do that. So basically, we are now being given responsibility for our own actions, aren't we?
Yeah, to a large extent. But unfortunately, if we abandon free testing, we're not going to know whether we've got COVID or whether we've got a common cold.
There's 1,000 people a week still dying. There's 300,000 people a week still testing positive. I think there's about 6 million tests taken. You come out too soon, you can just get that spike again. Why not wait another month until spring comes and people will be outdoors? I suppose it's because Boris Johnson is under political threat. That's what this is about. He's also going to move to end payments to people who have to isolate at home, your £500 payments for the very lowest paid. You could see what this is all about. He's shoring up his own position.
Yeah, when you say it's because of the political situation that Boris Johnson finds himself in, do you mean that he's trying to take the sting out of Partygate?
Yes.
By removing restrictions, so we all get lulled into a false sense of, well, there aren't any rules anyway, so what actually did he break? Is it a sort of psychological con trick you're suggesting he's playing on?
What I'm saying is he's looking for a diversion away from his big problems on Partygate, and he wants to shore up his position with 100 or so Tory MPs who might send letters demanding he go, who are lockdown sceptics.
Andrew,
if you're right, we're not that stupid, are we? We wouldn't fall for that. What do you think, Andrew?
Has Kevin not noticed something called Ukraine? There's rather a big distraction going on at the moment. It's called potentially the biggest war in Europe since 1945. It's occupying quite a lot of time of all political leaders, including NATO leaders, including the Prime Minister. I think that's a much bigger distraction than Partygate. Kevin gets it wrong a lot, but this is spectacular, spectacularly stupid, Kevin, even by your standards.
Andrew, you are using the term distraction. Ukraine, the invasion, the biggest invasion in Europe.
You said distraction.
You are seeing it as a distraction, a bigger distraction, you said. You know you are using the same language and you're having the same thought process as me because you know how Johnson and Number 10 operate.
Well, just before we get to the Ukraine, we'll talk to you about the Ukraine in a second, but just coming back to COVID, we now know the Queen has it, and she's been in this fantastic bubble for the last 2 years. They've kept it away, but it's finally got through. But she is 95. Apparently her symptoms are very mild. What kind of a treatment will she be getting?
She'll be getting observation, obviously, and she'll be getting supportive treatment. I mean, something as simple as paracetamol if she's got a temperature, which I doubt she has. My mother's just been in hospital where she contracted COVID. She's 95, almost the same age as the Queen. Got COVID in hospital, no symptoms whatsoever, despite her underlying illness. So there's every chance the Queen will be fine. Antiviral treatments are trialled in unvaccinated people. Queen is fully vaccinated, as I understand it. It's reported she certainly had the first jabs, and I imagine she would have had the full schedule. However, antivirals have only been trialled in unvaccinated people, and whilst they look very effective if used very early with people with mild symptoms who are vulnerable, they are usually reserved for people with underlying health conditions, which I don't believe the Queen has.
It's interesting because, Andrew, you're talking about the fact that, you know, it's the right time to lift the restrictions, but you have changed your behaviour. You know, you are going to stay at home because you're cautious, because you've had close contact with somebody with COVID. I was just watching the Queen there shaking hands with those defence chiefs. Now, not for a moment suggesting that's how she's picked up COVID, but I am now reluctant to actually shake hands with people. I do think that...
But you've had it. You've had COVID.
Yes, I have, but I was reluctant to shake hands with people before I...
Well, so's Prince Charles had it before.
I got it.
He tested positive 2 days after me.
But I thought that contact had been shown not to really be the high risk factor, that it's actually the stuff that's in the air.
Oh, it's respiratory. It's predominantly respiratory.
But Susanna's changed your behaviour throughout the pandemic, and I think a lot of people have.
Yes.
And so, some ways you won't want to go back to the way we were. I don't think shaking hands is a big deal. Some people fist bump, do elbows, or just say hello. But there is a worry that some people have been isolated and their worlds have closed in, and their mental health. And I don't think this is about helping them back, but we somehow need a way of re-engaging. And there are all those kids who missed out on schooling, and the government's catch-up programme, which was a tiny fraction of what was recommended. Huge complaints now about, is the tutoring going ahead? Are all those kids getting that help? But we've got a huge recovery programme, which is engaging people and helping them recover what's been lost.
And just quickly, in terms of the medical side to all this, I mean, obviously, if we mix in society, we build immunity up. We are constantly in contact with viruses and bacteria and all the rest of it, and that's part of our defence mechanism, is to actually get out there and mix. Given that so many people have been isolating, generally speaking, are people going to be more vulnerable now to infection than they were before because they've been in isolation for so long?
Well, as I said, the 1 in 20 people are currently, according to the ONS survey, are still being infected with COVID. So it's high case numbers right now. That's because we've come out of lockdown. People are generally getting back to normal. They're enjoying pretty good freedoms, and we do have a build-up of herd immunity. Having said that, it's always been about flattening the curve, and getting rid of all restrictions all at once is not going to flatten the curve. We would see a spike in cases, we'd see more hospitalisations. So whilst for most people, Omicron is not a serious variant with serious illness, for some people it is.
All right,
and we've
we'll
got
have
4 million people who are very clinically vulnerable who must be very worried about the thought of abandoning all restrictions because they won't be protected. And it's always been, according to the government, about protecting the most vulnerable. Actually, it hasn't.
Well, we'll have a good old row about this a bit later on in the programme. We'll get both sides of the argument.